All right, third time's a charm. Had to get my mate. Now, today's topic. One that I think a lot of people overlook, and it is money. It's how you make it rain into nothing. If you don't take adhesion to your wood floors seriously, you're gonna be making it rain everywhere but in your bank account, okay? The basics are the essentials. So there's no point at which you can take and make light of anything that, is in the process of putting on a finish coat over wood. Now, for this purpose, I'm going to talk about layered finishes over wood, not impregnating finishes in all the variants. Anything that puts a covering over wood using a resin. Now, the three most popular types of resin that we see: vinyl ester, methacrylate, polyurethane. And the corresponding products you would associate with that might be conversion varnish, water-based finish, and oil-based finish. Although now with the way they're hybridizing resins and doing things, these are just kind of general guidelines. Now, a general rule is that as elasticity goes up, hardness goes down and vice versa. All that means is that you need to consider that that ties in to that finish's ability to move with wood. All right, so how does that floor move and what is the thing on top doing with it? Because if they break, then something's not good and you're gonna have an unhappy homeowner and probably have to get a sander out. And I think I wanna speak to that is that sometimes we make light of problems with our finish coats because we just assume we can just screen and recoat our problems away. And I think that's a very, very shooting from the hip maneuver. And so think of it as a build process in a fine car. If you're an artisan, this is how you have to think. You're gonna apply layers in a consistent succession that are even, well burnished and abraded and connected. That's what we're looking for here. Speaking of which is our next two ways. There are two ways finishes bond to wood. Mechanically, they go in and they lock in between the grain of wood, and to each other they need to adhere. So coat number one needs to somehow find a groove and settle in and glue itself to coat number two. They have to join. Now, chemical bond is where there's enough solvent in the top coat that is coming onto the base coat that they will fuse through a hot chemistry. And now, poly sometimes can chemically fuse within a window before it sets up completely, and I know you can coat, and there are rules and exceptions to this in the way that things, but generally you have a mechanical and a chemical bond, and if you look at your finishes in that way and plan accordingly, then you will succeed when you're using layered finishes. Okay, now surface prep, this is what I call necessary roughness. And too often in this industry, you see people who are saying, I want it to look smooth and flat. That can come at a cost. If you have made the surface too smooth for anything to go into the wood, then you're just kind of wasting everyone's time. All right, so here's a piece of wood. Green, this example would represent stain or whatever penetrating type finish or sealer you would use. Now keep in mind, the sealer does go between the joints of the wood. Even though they're tight to your eye, the water finds, and it goes, water's polar. It travels and it finds those wood fibers, the cellulose. We're gonna talk about polarity another time. Then you have your next base coat that attaches to that, say coat number two, if you will, sealer and coat number one, whatever way you wanna call it. They adhere, and then you're gonna come in and put on your final coat. Now, at that point, if you're relying on the following. You have a tooth of roughness for where finish can flow. The flatness of the overall coating comes from the ability of the top surface of your final coat to glass out. So realistically, if your fear is that you're not going to get a flat looking coat because you abrade too harshly and leave a scratch, you're gonna be in trouble because you need that scratch for the finish to go. All right, a few things. Mechanical finishes that bond, they can generally be lower in solvent content, and they do require a little bit more methodical prep. Again, because there's no solvent heating to the base coat creating adhesion. Chemical layer fusion it really does aid in the bond. So everything sticks to the wood really well when you use a chemically bonded system. You get a little bit of what I call increased elasticity in the resins that are available to work in these finishes. Solvent evacuation is far more essential. If you can definitely trap solvent in between the coatings and the chemical bonded systems and create issues. Now, how does a finish generally work? You have a solution, the little dots being your resin, the stuff that gives it its hardness. And then the red line represents, that's the limit of solubility, how much stuff you can get in that liquid. Now, a general rule would be, as you add solvent, you increase your solubility. As you decrease solubility, you also decrease the amount of room for stuff to go into there. It has to do with Avogadro's number and the amount of atoms and molecules that can fit in a space. But anyway, solubility is our determinant. Now, one last thing. Harmfulness is not related to perceptibility. And what I mean by that is, don't assume that because you don't smell a finish that it's not bad for you. Everything needs to be treated like a grown adult here. All right, abrasion and prep. Now, check my time. Each job is unique. And the abrasion of how you're going to abrade each job generally should be evaluated each time. If you have a process where you just want to hand stuff off and say, go 180 every floor, and then all of a sudden you got that one that just sets up a little faster and the coating doesn't stick, you have a problem at hand. The suggested life of an abrasive doesn't mean that you should quit observing what the abrasive is doing. I mean, you can get magnifiers and eye loops and look and see, is this abrasive plugged at the surface? Am I just pushing around dust? Prep dust, the dust in the white that you see powdering, it may be a good indicator, but it's also a good adhesion decreaser. And what I mean by that is if you skim over and there's a bunch of dust in the cracks and not enough finish to wet that out, you're gonna have peeling finish layers. So vacuum very well. Even if it powders up and you like seeing that powder disappear, you're actually competing in a solid space with a liquid to grab that valley. So it's kind of a dumb thing. But there are guys who swear by it, but they use a lot of chemically bonded finishes also. Over abrading is detrimental to coatings optics. So just like it says, it may be good, you would get every little booger out, but basically don't put boogers in and get them out and make it look right. But don't get to the point where it's so polished the next coat won't stay in place. How to win. That's what this is all about. How do you win every day? I'm gonna teach you how they can fail, but how do you win? Air exchange is critical. If you don't have like a $50 or $60 air mover fan, buy one or two, depends on your climate, your humidity, etc. But it's very critical. Observe your scratch pattern regularly. Teach your guys how to observe scratch patterns. Go after it. Look in there. Is there something that this finish is going into? Because if it looks like a polished piece of plexiglass, you got trouble. Never rush the process. That means let all the solvents go away. Just because they said you could do this many coats in a day, it could have been that they tested that on a dry day and you're in the middle of a thunderstorm. Be careful. Communicate everything, don't assume. This originates and specifically goes to anyone putting tape on your floor. If they're putting tape on your floor, then you need to figure this out, because what it is a race for that tape to stick within your final coat and your final coat to stick to the base coat below that. And it's going to be whoever wins, whoever sticks the hardest. That's all that happens. So if you have painters in this process, you got to talk. Going through the motions is just dumb. Don't just go through the motions because that's what Uncle Bob said to do. All right, white lines, I'm just gonna finish with that. Resin can be to blame, but by the point in time when you're trying to implicate a finish manufacturer, they're gonna find a bunch of other reasons why something caused this to happen. So, and it's really not, plan ahead, don't get white lines is what I'm saying. Removal generally requires sanders. If you get it, just prepare the homeowner. It's time to move out, we gotta sand this off. There are ways to kind of get it out in small sections, but generally prepare to sand. Solvents are a big contributor to white lines. Oh, that's what I mean, sorry. Solvent that traps within coatings. As it tries to come out, it can actually push your coating upward as it's bubbling, and it can create that pop and adhesion between board edges. So be careful. Back to the process. Never rush it. Last thing, plan your projects around reality and not other people's wishes. If they want a crazy dark floor with all this kind of finish on it that's prone to white lines, and it's at the beach, no bro, no go. Sometimes the best job is the one you didn't get. All right, have a great day, my homies.